The Scum Villain Self-Saving System. Extra Chapter. Airplane's Fortuitous Encounter, Part 3. Before Xiāng Tóngxiù even finished speaking, he was solidly peeled off the cart and thrown to the ground. His body, fallen right in front of Mo Beijun's boots, his sword, still half stuck in its sheath, his heart, hadn't quite decided whether or not to draw his sword. Mo Beijun sneered as an ice-cold glint of blue flashing through his eyes. No sooner said than done, Xiāng Tóngxiù threw himself over to hug his thighs with a plop. All his shiksheng, equals. Mo Beijun, equals. Xiāng Tóngxiù fell to one knee. My king, please let me follow you for the rest of my life. Mo Beijun wanted to fling him off with a kick, but Xiāng Tóngxiù's clinging ability was too strong. He wanted to kill him with a blow, but that was even more difficult. Just like a gecko clinging to the wall, he nimbly crawled back and forth, but still managed to stay stuck firmly to his thighs. He couldn't help but blaze in anger. Seeing this incredible feat of stickiness, all the Nding Peak outer disciples were overjoyed. Throwing down their goods, they flew in all directions to escape. Xiāng Tóngxiù was just cursing them soundly in his heart when not 3 seconds later, all he could hear was a field of screams. Tens of strands of ice, thin as silk, pierced through their chests. In a mad dance of silver light, droplets of blood flew in all directions. Seeing this, Xiāng Tóngxiù's grip on Mo Beijun's thighs became as strong as steel. He started to chatter incessantly, "My king, please accept me. I'm very useful." Mo Beijun seemed to have tilted his body. "Oh? What use are you? I can serve tea, carry water, wash clothes, fold blankets, no." Xiāng Tóngxiù considerately analyzed for him, "You see, my king, I can serve you as an undercover agent in Kengqiang Mountain, pass on intelligence and realize the magnificent feat of unifying the demon race with the human realm." Mo Beijun laughed. "An outer disciple, and an Nding Peak outer disciple at that. With you as a spy, what year and month could you realize the magnificent feat of unifying the demon race with the human realm?" Xiāng Tóngxiù said with some embarrassment, "Don't discriminate by peak, that isn't very nice. Why did even the demon race discriminate against them on this basis? And the discrimination against Nding Peak even surpassed that against being an outer disciple. I can't take it, I really can't take it." While he was weeping bitter tears, tangled and impossible to unravel, desperately fighting for a future, Mo Beijun. He fell to the ground completely without warning. Xiāng Tóngxiù was still hugging his thighs, so when Mo Beijun fell, he was almost squashed right under him. He hurriedly let go. He crouched for a while in a daze, suddenly coming to his senses. Did Mo Beijun come here injured? No wonder his expression was so unsightly and his temper was so ugly, this easy to push over. Did he accidentally poke one of his wounds with a slip of his hand? Sometimes a slip of the hand was an advantage. Xiāng Tóngxiù cautiously moved over, examining him carefully. Just as expected, there was a thin wound the length of a finger on Mo Beijun's lower waist, roughly over his right kidney. A sharp corner of something gold poked out from inside the wound. He could vaguely see that it was forged from gold threads, an intricate piece of handiwork in the shape of the edge of a flower petal. So fancy and ornate, it was Huanhua Palace's Linghua dart, that's right. This type of weapon was one of the nonsense details airplane Juju had cooked up on the fly as a writer. The body of the dart was light and thin and coated with a bit of anesthesia. It was very difficult for its targets to discover the object breaching their body. If they moved too much, the dart would magnificently blossom, developing 6 sharp flower petals to cut the internal organs of its target. Didn't this sound a bit familiar? Didn't it seem like it was created as a set with some type of demon realm organism? It didn't matter, that's easy enough to explain. This thing, which could be called a Linghua dart, was created by some Huanhua Palace elder who had escaped from the demon realm by the skin of their teeth and was based on that strange organism called Qingxi. In short, there's no need to worry about the finer details. Background narration complete, let's rip ourselves back to the main topic. That was to say, this pure-blooded second-generation demon who very well might beat him to death with a single strike in the future, not only had his kidney poked through by Huanhua Palace dart but was also seriously anesthetized. It seems like Mo Beijun had just killed his way out of Huanhua Palace's encirclement charm. The demon race held their grudges for a long time, and the Mo Bei clan had an old grievance with Huanhua Palace. Huanhua Palace, being the sect with the most deaths and injuries at the siege on the Immortal Alliance Conference, was precisely Mo Beijun's retaliation against them. It connected seamlessly with airplane shooting towards the sky's outline. Xiāng Tóngxiù muttered back and forth in his heart with a mischievous giggle on his face. He looked around on the ground for a while before finding a stone about half the size of a head and hefted it up. It was quite heavy. 1, 2, 3, he got in position to smash it on the head of the closed-eyed Mo Beijun. The system didn't offer any warning hints or prohibiting alerts. Xiāng Tóngxiù relaxed. There's no warning, that's to say, okay to kill. My king, my king, this is the will of heaven, don't blame me. With a completely insincere prayer, his hand rose and the stone fell. And braked to a halt, right in front of Mo Beijun's arguably perfect nose. In fact, this character of Mo Beijun held an unusual significance to him. It could be said that Mo Beijun was the type of man airplane Juju dreamed of becoming. Strong, cool, following his own way, like how every little kid's childhood dream of becoming Ultraman. How could he apathetically watch on as he killed Ultraman with his own hands? Xiāng Tóngxiù whimpered for a while. After he finished, he had a completely shameless thought, it's fine if he just doesn't watch, right? So, he turned his head, raising the stone up high. No, he still couldn't do it. Xiāng Tóngxiù threw aside the cumbersome murder weapon with a plop. His eyes shining with emotion, his whole body nearly fell on top of Mo Beijun. He can't, the more he looks the more he feels this face was too demonically handsome. The truth was in his innermost heart, Bing Ge's type of fair and clear pretty boy appearance didn't really suit his tastes. Airplane flying towards the sky Juju only gave the protagonist this sort of configuration to complete his stallion hardware facilities. Stallions also had to be planted with some science behind them. And the scientific research was clear, women preferred the cultured and pretty type, with even a bit soft and feminine appearance. Protagonists couldn't avoid getting blasted. It could be said that Bing Ge had 3 parts fans to 5 parts haters. But Mo Beijun was not the same. Supporting characters always attracted a lot of love, and Mo Beijun had practically never gotten hated on. This character was created completely according to his own tastes. Because he was a character secretly favored by the author, Mo Beijun embodied airplane shooting towards the sky's scholarly aesthetic of the ideal man. Don't ask why Luo Binghe didn't embody his ideal man. Luo Binghe's use was primarily to fulfill his desire to play cool and slap faces, as well as his desire for wanton. This section ought to be crossed out. Even the young Mo Beijun of the present, though not yet fully grown, was completely in line with eyes deep as night, nose straight and high, full of heroic spirit, icily arrogant beyond compare, those words describing his true aesthetic. This was the beautiful man he dreamed of in his heart. The stone murder weapon lifted and lowered, lowered and lifted. Xiāng Tóngxiù was faced with a difficult life and death choice for the first time in his life, after transmigration. Finally, Xiāng Tóngxiù decided, time to rent a room. He needed to find an inn to rent a room, no, a resting house. This place was a field of dead bodies. Xiāng Tóngxiù hesitated a bit, then poured that pile of Qingjing Peak's heavy and useless nuisances clean off the cart like a pile of garbage. Then he lifted Mo Beijun up, face down to cover that face that could make him lose reason every time he looked at it. He couldn't return to Qingqiang Mountain for the time being. On that side, no one should be able to realize that anything was amiss so quickly because this trip was anticipated to last 7 days, of which only 2 had passed. To stand steadfast by this demonic young heir and protect him when he was weakened by a sneak attack, it was a wonderful opportunity to garner some goodwill. Comforting himself with this reasoning, Xiāng Tóngxiù huffed and puffed, pushing that large flatbed cart towards the city. To rent the room, Xiāng Tóngxiù spent the secret stash of money he had been saving these last few years. At this time, he was only an ordinary, mediocre outer disciple. He didn't have any authority to manage accounts or draw from the sect coffers. Renting a room was already stretching the limits of his economic ability. So, as a matter of course, it was a single room. Also, as a matter of course, there was only one bed. Who this bed belonged to, was also a matter of course. Of course, it was for himself. Spread out like a starfish, Xiāng Tóngxiù sprawled on the bed like a corpse. After he had finished stretching out his muscles and bones, he crawled up and carried Mo Beijun onto the bed. This was necessary. Mo Beijun was already in a bad mood and high temper after being injured. If he woke up and find himself lying on the ground or scrunched into a chair, could Xiāng Tóngxiù still keep his life? Of course, he wouldn't consider his benefactor in the situation before awarding him with an icicle through the chest. When they were passing by a medicine stand just then, Xiāng Tóngxiù had bought a bit of such and such ointment. With the demonic race's unusually strong vitality, he could just toss him there and ignore him, and no matter how large a hole his body had, it would gradually close. However, since he had decided to hug some thighs, he knew he had to discard all reservations to display his sincerity. As a self-proclaimed proper subordinate, airplane shooting towards the sky, Juju looked down on hypocrites who claimed to be hugging thighs but were just putting on an act. He boldly dug out a large lump, shoving it into the hole in Mo Beijun's kidney until it was more or less closed. Then he flipped him over and arranged his hands palms together in a sleeping beauty pose. After admiring this perfect face that he had modeled after his ideal man, he pillowed his head on his arms and fell asleep on the outer side of the bed. The summer night was stifling hot. Even with the window open, not a wisp of cool breeze flowed in. After tossing and turning for half the night, he finally managed to doze off when someone suddenly shoved him to the ground with a kick to the butt. Xiāng Tóngxiù was almost frightened to death by this kick. He tumbled and darted under the table, hesitantly turning his head in a panic. Mo Beijun sat straight up on the bed, eyes shining blue like an overcharged battery about to explode. Xiāng Tóngxiù had long thought up his lines. Full of expressive tone, he beat his chest and stomped his feet, saying, "My king, you're finally awake." Mo Beijun didn't move an inch and continued to coldly gaze at him. "Xiāng Tóngxiù, do you still remember who I am?" The other didn't respond. Xiāng Tóngxiù didn't feel a bit of embarrassment and was even delightedly considering the possibility of amnesia. He barreled on, "Now that, we met on the small road just then. I said I would follow you for the rest of my life, my king, as your..." Mo Beijun cut him off. "What were you holding me for just now?" "Clothes like a little padded jacket." Xiāng Tóngxiù started. "What did you say?" "I did what to you just now?" "You were holding me." A sudden realization like thunder from a clear sky. This damn heat was like baking in a furnace, and as it turned out, Mo Beijun's body temperature was cold. In the bleariness of sleep, he had subconsciously moved towards the cooler side, and the closer he got, the cooler and more comfortable it felt. No wonder he had dreamed of a giant popsicle, happily wrapping his four limbs right around like an octopus, licking and crying happy tears. Xiāng Tóngxiù carefully peeked at Mo Beijun's face and neck. Seeing no peculiar shine of water, he couldn't resist letting out an amachuofo. He cautiously said, "Your body was ice cold. I was afraid you weren't going to make it, so I was holding you to keep you warm." Hearing this, Mo Beijun scoffed. "Moron! I'm naturally like this, the colder my body the better. I'm not a human, where cold means nearing death." Xiāng Tóngxiù was carefully watching his words and expression the whole time. Seeing his expression soften, a smile immediately spread across his face. Just when he was about to slither out from under the table like a snake crawling up the stick used to strike it, Mo Beijun suddenly recovered his icy cold demeanor. "You just try making another move." Xiāng Tóngxiù immediately lost the courage to move, pathetically holding a wooden leg, he rolled into a ball like a hamster under the table. Mo Beijun said, "What is your goal?" Xiāng Tóngxiù said shamelessly, "I don't really have a goal, I just want to follow you for the rest of my life." Mo Beijun acted as if he didn't hear him. "You're an Nding Peak outer disciple." Nowadays, Xiāng Tóngxiù always felt that whenever anyone stressed those three words Nding Peak, it carried an overtone of prejudice. For fear that Mo Beijun would deem himself useless and do away with him right away, he poked out his head. "My king, listen to me, I'm still young, I still have opportunities to rise in status. Go back." Xiāng Tóngxiù hurriedly retreated back to safety. Satisfied with this distance, Mo Beijun said, "You assisting me, is it for those opportunities to rise in status?" Sure enough, he was proud and arrogant. He didn't use save as it denoted weakness and instead changed it to assist as this wording carried an overtone of subordination. Xiāng Tóngxiù laughed mischievously, playing dumb. No? The credibility of this response was less than 3%. Yes? Mo Beijun rather looked down upon this type of spineless subordinate. This was the reason the original didn't think twice about killing the original goods Xiāng Tóngxiù, because he had never planned on letting him live in the first place. How could he shamelessly admit that he did it just to chase up his goodwill stat? Fortunately, Mo Beijun had long come to a conclusion, a label of greedy for life, afraid of death, slippery bootlicker, sect sellout had been slapped onto Xiāng Tóngxiù's head. He didn't need him to respond, only letting out a cold snort and lying down again. Xiāng Tóngxiù waited for a long time, not moving another step. Had he gotten a concession from him for the time being? Or, did he faint again? In the end, Xiāng Tóngxiù still didn't dare to rashly approach and nestled under the table, making do for the night. After tossing and turning for half the night, upon waking the next morning, Xiāng Tóngxiù officially began a busy day of being the cow and acting as the horse. In that morning alone, Xiāng Tóngxiù worked hard without complaint to run up and down more than 20 times, changing the water in the bathtub 7 or 8 times. This water was to help Mo Beijun heal his wounds. Soaking in water would be better for this ice-powered uncle after all. But before he soaked for a whole hour, a perfectly good tub of warm water would turn into icy slush. Xiāng Tóngxiù huddled in the corner, chewing on some rations he had with him while watching Mo Beijun undress, feeling both extreme envy and extreme admiration for that figure and that abdomen that he yearned for in his dreams. As he watched, he suddenly realized Mo Beijun had stopped and stared at him with a displeased expression on his face. Xiāng Tóngxiù chewed a couple of times, hurriedly eating a few extra bites, just in case Mo Beijun suddenly demanded he hand over his rations. Mo Beijun asked, "You're very idle." Xiāng Tóngxiù said hurriedly, "Not salty, this one is sweet." He didn't have the chance to eat a few more bites before a few strips of black shadows hit him full in the face. So, Xiāng Tóngxiù wasn't idle anymore as he had to go wash his newly claimed master's clothes. That's right, this young demonic heir had come out in this set and now it was full of holes and blood and sweat, how could he wear it any longer? So of course, Xiāng Tóngxiù had to sew it and mend it and wash it and dry it. This low-magic Xiangxia world was precisely this unromantic and dismal, a reality of 10,000 evils. Xiāng Tóngxiù swore, if he ever had the opportunity to change back to airplane shooting towards the sky juju, his next book would be of the high magic Xianhuan genre, the type where brains could be swallowed and science fed to the dogs. Weaving clouds into garments, trimming the moon into a belt, all manual labor could be resolved with the twitch of a finger. There will never be a need again for this type of dismal existence like in Nding Peak. Considerately patching up the hole in Mo Beijun's clothes near his kidney, wringing them dry and hanging them in the room, Xiāng Tóngxiù felt he had made a very good show of himself that day. Since it was night, he thickened his face and crawled towards the bed, still carrying this mysterious self-confidence. Before he had gotten close to the bedside, history repeated itself and he was kicked off again. He sat on the ground, tears in both eyes, his voice trembling. "My king, you won't let me on the bed, what if in the night you feel cold, thirsty, hungry, or want to turn over, what then? Mo Beijun lifted an eyebrow and said, easily done. So, he ordered Xiāng Tóngxiù to find a strand of rope. One end tied on his finger and the other tied on Xiāng Tóngxiù's finger? How could he be that fortunate? It was his neck. Xiāng Tóngxiù laid on the ground like a corpse, thinking to himself that this human was living a life worse than a fucking dog. The only comforting thought he could find was that at least Mo Beijun wasn't some sort of pervert and didn't tie the other end on his beep. That would really be inhuman treatment. He passed 4 days like this, suffering every kind of torment. Xiāng Tóngxiù really felt that the days dragged by like years. Even his nights were an unceasing nightmare. Today, in the middle of the night, Xiāng Tóngxiù was sound asleep and was dreaming again. This time he dreamed he was in the real world, crying and weeping towards a computer screen. Beside him was a fiendish large man, holding a thorny cucumber like a rather hairy lower leg, fiercely thrashing his face, thrashing and roaring, everything you write is some cracked trash. Airplane shooting towards the sky dodged the cucumber like his life depended on it, striving to explain himself. I already haven't updated in very long. Cucumber bro, don't be like this. Peerless cucumber, then why don't you quickly update? Saying this, a loop of rope wrapped around his neck. Suffering every sort of hardship, Xiāng Tóngxiù fought to wake up only to find the rope still tightening around his neck. Following it with his gaze, Mo Beijun was lying on the bed, mechanically pulling on the rope tied to his hand. Xiāng Tóngxiù said dispiritedly, "My king, is there anything you want?" Only after asking a couple of times did he discover that Mo Beijun wasn't giving him a hard time on purpose. He was completely unconscious, just tossing and turning in extreme discomfort, blearily messing with the thing in his hand to vent his anger. As the unfortunate one with the rope around his neck, Xiāng Tóngxiù's eyeballs were almost squeezed out under the force of his pulls. Mo Beijun pursed his brow, still restlessly rolling back and forth. Xiāng Tóngxiù quietly tiptoed to his bedside. Seeing the shallow beads of sweat seeping from his smooth forehead and the wisps of hot air rising from his clothes, he understood. The wound in Mo Beijun's kidney looked like it was only a small wound and not anything alarming, but the true situation was a bit serious. It's just that he stubbornly tried to ride it through, refusing to say a word. Moreover, it goes without saying that the ice demons hated hot weather the most. It was the height of summer and maybe the wound was undergoing something similar to inflammation, even beginning to fester. If his kidney was healing this slowly, did he need some sort of renal aid to strengthen it a bit? The Mobei clan just needed cold temperatures. If they didn't have cold temperatures they would have to make their own. Xiāng Tóngxiù muttered, a sleeping posture really so fucking bad, then accepted his fate and went out. Not hindered by the fact that knocking on doors in the middle of the night would be quite rude, he asked for 2 leaf fans, a basin of water and 2 clean towels. He returned and wiped Mo Beijun down, then placed a wet towel on his forehead. Taking up the leaf fans, one in his left hand and one in his right, he fanned as though his life depended on it. He fanned and yawned incessantly, fanning until his eyes were bleary. Half in a dreaming and half awake state, he seemed to see that Mo Beijun's eyes were open. Icy blue pupils were bright and cold under the moonlight, like a pair of magnificent and eerie chrysoberyl gems. This scene really was too frightening. Xiāng Tóngxiù shivered, opening his eyes wide to take a better look, but Mo Beijun's eyes were clearly shut tight. When he woke up, he realized there was a major problem. Last night, Xiāng Tóngxiù had been dizzy from the heat. Waving and waving those leaf fans, he had managed to topple over on the bed and fall asleep. Too close, too close. Thankfully Mo Beijun was still asleep. If he woke up, he might just kick his brains flying. Xiāng Tóngxiù hurriedly jumped off the bed, laying down in that piece of territory he had claimed for himself beneath the headboard. After a while, the bed frame began to creak lightly and Mo Beijun finally sat up. Xiāng Tóngxiù hissed to himself, that was too close. If he had woken up a bit later, he'd be a blood splatter on the spot. The next day, having gained King Mobei's gracious permission, he could finally see the light again, to go out to take a walk on the street. The fact was, he had hugged Mobei Jun's thighs and wailed, "My king, I'm out of rations, my cultivation level isn't high enough that I can eat when I want and abstain when I don't. If you don't let me go out to buy rations, I'll starve to death and I'm afraid my corpse would stink up the room for you." He bought a bowl of thin congee to drink from the shop at the street corner. The congee was clear as water. Lowering his head and seeing a glimpse of his reflection, he had a wan and sallow appearance like he had been trampled, a chrysanthemum battered by the rain. Just when he was wallowing in his wretched misery, he heard someone call Shidi, from behind. Turning to look, he saw 4 or 5 young men, exuding a cool immortal aura, sleeves and hems fluttering in the breeze, shouldering long swords and solemnly walking towards him. Comrades, his comrades from Kengkayang mountain sect. That's right, 7 days had already passed, they had organized a group of people to come find him. Xiāng Tóngxiù was moved to tears. Reaching out a trembling hand, he said, "Shiksheng, Wei Shiksheng." A smile filled the face of the leading youth. 2 swords hung at his waist, one long one short, his sleeves billowing as if filled with a cool breeze. It was Wangjian Peak's Wei King Wei Shiksheng. Seeing Xiāng Tóngxiù rush out to greet him, he raised a hand to meet him, feeling moved. "Xidi, you, what happened to you? How did you completely change into this state in the last few days since we met? You don't even look human anymore." Xiāng Tóngxiù choked back down a face full of hot tears, embarrassed. "That's probably because I'm not Shiksheng." Right now he had only gotten a bit skinnier because he didn't have anything good to eat. "What's with that don't even look human" comment. "Moreover, Wei Shiksheng and you all, I've polished every sword in your Wangjian Peak sword testing station at least 3 times, and every time you want me to sweep your rooms while I'm at it, and make your food while I'm at it, and also feed your pangolins, but you've forgotten my face this quickly." Wei King Wei said, "Can't you see I'm making a joke? What, is it not funny? Oh right, Shangshidi, why are you all alone? Where are the others? Why did you delay your return, did something happen?" "Wei Shiksheng, you really like to make these corny jokes. The others, the others." This sudden encounter was too unexpected, and Xiāng Tóngxiù couldn't make up a seamless story on short notice. He could only sway a couple of times, his face deathly pale, then fall to the ground with a plop. Right now, he looked like his body couldn't hold up much longer and absolutely no one would suspect if he faked fainting. While he was playing dead, he sensed Wei King Wei crouch down, poking his face a couple of times. The others said, "Shiksheng, he fainted, what should we do?" Wei King Wei said, still poking, "What can we do? Let's drag him back first and figure it out then." Kayang Ding Peak. Rows and rows of dead bodies were arranged outside the main hall. Other than Xiāng Tóngxiù, each of the Nding Peak outer disciples who were sent to retrieve goods that day were lying there, not missing a single one. Xiāng Tóngxiù kneeled in front of the bodies, tears pattering to the ground. There was nothing to be done. It was difficult to get by in this cultivation world. Someone with no good innate ability like him really couldn't do without well-developed tear glands. How else could he put on an act of heartbroken sorrow, can't even speak clearly in front of the Peak Lords just now? After the Peak Lords had finished asking questions, they had gone inside the hall to discuss, the atmosphere serious and solemn. He suddenly heard the tinkling of sword tassel pendants bouncing against each other, a youth wearing Qingjing Peak uniform slowly approaching. This youth had snowy fair skin, slender brows and eyes, pale lips and a somewhat harsh appearance. Black hair was neatly tied behind his head with a light green ribbon, holding a long sword in his arms. It was precisely that tyrant, that inauspicious star, a certain exotic flower from Qingjing Peak, proud immortal demon Wei's scum villain par excellence of the generation Shen King Kaihu. After Shen King Kaihu finished examining the bodies, he asked indifferently, "Did that demon ask you to bring back some message, or some object. Xiāng Tóngxiù was startled. This superior had actually taken the initiative to speak with him. He felt overwhelmed by the favor. No. Xiāng Tóngxiù habitually raised his chin, often looking down his nose at others. Every time Xiāng Tóngxiù spoke with him, he felt as if he was sneering at him, though sneering didn't really matter, he was already used to it. Xiāng Tóngxiù said, with an expression like a smile yet not. Then that's strange. 7 or 8 people all died. If you don't have some message to take to us, why would you of all people be the only survivor? Xiāng Tóngxiù blinked his eyes, tears once again streaming down. This time, Xiāng Tóngxiù smiled for real. Xiāng Shidi. What was the reason you could escape unscathed and return to Xiāng Mountain? He absolutely could not give a careless response to these words. This guy, the Xiāng Tóngxiù of this world, worked according to his original setup. He wasn't the same as those IQ 40, paper-thin cannon fodders, and he absolutely was not easy to deceive. If he blew his cover and struck back with a complaint, his undercover career would be over before it even began. He smiled and played dumb for 30 seconds. Suddenly, the light bulb on top of his head lit up and right away he began to stammer, it might be because he didn't hesitate a second to kneel? Because he yelled "My king!" Loud and sincere? Because he brazenly abandoned all his dignity? Xiāng Tóngxiù waited patiently and got a fit of gut-wrenching coughs for his trouble. Xiāng Tóngxiù coughed until tears poured from his eyes. Xiāng Tóngxiù backed up a step, a shade of disgust on his face. Everything has its weakness, see who I'll summon to come deal with you. Sure enough, after 5 seconds, King Yuan's voice sounded out from behind them. King Shidi, the behavior of the demon race has no rhyme nor reason in the first place, and Xiāng Shidi only just managed to escape a great catastrophe. Even if there are questions to ask, why not wait until he recovers a bit? And he appears. The God-tier summon do-gooder future sect leader King Yuan enters the battlefield. Xiāng Tóngxiù silently began to count. Xiāng Tóngxiù raised his hand and said, Fine. If my words are unpleasant to hear, I won't say any more. You Shixing, as you will. 1 hit. King Yuan said, this time, our Shidi from Anding Peak descended the mountain to help handle affairs for Qingjing Peak in the first place. Why must Shidi be so half-hearted in his sympathy and stingy in giving? Xiāng Shidi, why are you coughing harder and harder? Do you need me to go call Qiancao Peak's Mu Shidi to take a look at you? 2 hit. Xiāng Tóngxiù shook his head at King Yuan, shedding tears of gratitude. He continued to count. Xiāng Tóngxiù sneered, the 12 peaks each oversee their own duties, each has their own expertise. Anding Peak is supposed to do this in the first place, why must you Shixing talk like they've been wronged in some way, like Anding Peak is the only one with things to do in Xiāng Mountain? Besides, don't tell me Shixing believes they really do work hard without complaint? That they don't curse us out behind our backs every day. 3 hit. King Yuan's expression was unerringly patient from beginning to end. He was just about to respond when Xiāng Tóngxiù cut him off. Stop. Thank you for your instruction, Shixing. This Tóngxiù will continue to listen in the future. I'll be on my way. 4 hit. Set. He just knew it. If these two struck up a conversation, they would absolutely part on bad terms by the 5th sentence. After Xiāng Tóngxiù walked away holding his Xiuya sword, King Yuan finally turned around. Xiāng Shidi, you've suffered a scare. Xiāng Tóngxiù said hurriedly, No. Compared to the exhaustion and exploitation he'd suffered these past few days, a little scare was nothing at all. The old man lost his horse, but it was a blessing in disguise. After this incident, maybe because the old Anding Peak Lord wanted to appease Xiāng Tóngxiù or whatever, he was promoted to be an official inner disciple. Xiāng Tóngxiù sang happily the whole way, returning to the large common dormitory to pack up his things before arriving at Anding Peak's highest level leisure house to report for duty. That's right, You didn't read that wrong. On Anding Peak, these disciples who ran around here and there all their lives like roughly used servant girls lived in a dormitory called the Leisure House. Leisure my ass. Airplane shooting towards the sky. Juju swore he didn't come up with this name in the first place with any satirical overtone, but nowadays he felt the immense malice of this world every time he saw these two words. Xiāng Tóngxiù found his own small room. Exhausted in both body and mind, he persevered and laid out his bedding, turning to pour himself a cup of water. When he turned back around, someone else had already laid down in his bed. In an utter cliché, the new teacup he had received from the steward's office dropped from his hands to the ground. His legs softened, nearly sitting his butt right down on the ground. My king! Mo Beijun turned, face towards him. He was expressionless but his voice was cold as ice. Following me the rest of your life, N. Xiāng Tóngxiù was about to cry in fright. He even followed him back. He never thought, no, strictly speaking, it wasn't like he never thought mysterious phantom, come and go like a shadow. He had created this special ability himself in the first place so Mo Beijun could help Binggur kill people and set fires, move under cover of dark anywhere and anytime. Xiāng Tóngxiù babbled non-stop, my king, let me explain. That day as soon as I went outside, I just wanted to drink some congee and come back but who knew that fate was fooling around with me. I ran into a Xiāng I'm familiar with. I was afraid he'd ask too many questions and I'd let something slip, and he'd take people to look for you and cause trouble to you, my king, that wouldn't be good. Moreover, your injuries weren't causing you serious trouble anymore so I thought it through from different angles and decided I had to endure disgrace for my mission and follow them back. Then if I saw an opportunity I would. The hand Mo Beijun was using to prop up his temple seemed to have gotten tired and he switched to the other. They told you to return, and you just followed them back. Xiāng Tóngxiù said, aggrieved, what else could I have done? Refuse to submit unto death? Show my hand and fight? That wouldn't do. Aside from the fact that I can't defeat them, the important thing is, I still had to be an undercover agent for you. My king, how could I tear down my face for Xiāng Mountain this early? In the midst of this wildfire burst of enthusiasm, he struck while the iron was hot. I'm pleased to report to my king, I've already become an inner disciple, isn't that showing ample drive? Doesn't that have a lot of upward potential? Kissing up to the extreme. However, no matter how much he looked like he was kissing up on the surface, airplane shooting towards the sky Juju's inner heart was placid clouds and soft breezes. He always firmly believed that 1. There's a prime time for a real man to kneel, the order is right. 2. A real man does not easily cry, if he doesn't cry now then when would he? These two major rules of life told him that in times of great need, kissing up a bit wasn't anything remarkable. If one thought about it another way, Mo Beijun was a character he created and as an author, he was equivalent to his own son. For a father to concede a bit to his own son, to show a bit of love, of course it wasn't anything remarkable. That so-called children are the debt's parents so from their previous lives. Ping ping pang pang. After suffering another bout of beating, Xiāng Tóngxiù hugged his knees and crouched in the chair, adeptly using the Qi spirit technique to heal his wounds. After stretching out his muscles and bones, Mo Beijun laid back down on the bed, stretching out and turning his back towards Xiāng Tóngxiù. His voice was not loud nor soft, carrying a hint of a hidden trap. We'll continue tomorrow. You fucking want to continue? Xiāng Tóngxiù had an urge to scream and shout, to call down the entirety of Xiāng Mountain to accompany him to his death. End chapter.